Welcome to this presentation. This is Dr. Moore. Chapter 7 can be seen as middle level in focus between the micro-orientation of Chapter 6, which looked at social interaction in everyday life, and the more macro-level orientation of the chapters that will follow. The topic here is groups and organizations. As a brief overview of what we'll be covering in this presentation, we'll start with a survey of what we know about groups. We'll take a look at the importance of primary groups and how they differ from secondary groups. After that, a discussion of various dimensions of group dynamics involving leadership, conformity among group members, reference groups, in-groups and out-groups, and the consequences of group size and diversity of membership. We'll continue with an introduction to formal organizations. We'll consider how Weber saw the development of formal organizations as an element of rational modern societies. Certainly, formal organizations themselves have changed over the last century. The next section explores the evolution of these organizations, beginning with the scientific management model, which itself is based on Weber's thinking and reflects a military organizational model. We'll see organizations evolving as they become more open to new organizational models and a flattening of organizational structure. We'll take a look at the trend toward McDonaldization, George Ritzer's term, and we'll conclude with a brief look at the future of organizations and the effects of technology on our lives. A social group is defined as two or more people who identify and interact with each other. Now, though one could argue that individuals form the foundation of any society, groups and organizations also have a profound influence over people's lives. A primary group is a small social group whose members share personal and enduring relationships. Some of the characteristics of primary groups: well, people in these groups share many activities, spend a great deal of time together, and they feel they know one another well. Families are considered primary groups in that they're the first groups we experience in life, and because they are of central importance to the socialization process. Members think of the primary group as an end in itself rather than as a means to another end. Members also view each other as unique and irreplaceable. On the other hand, secondary groups are large and impersonal social groups devoted to some specific interest or activity. They involve rather weak emotional ties. Commonly, they're short-term, they're goal-oriented, and typically they're impersonal. This table from the text summarizes the differences between primary and secondary groups. A basic thing to remember is members in a primary group have a personal orientation, while those in a secondary group have a goal orientation. Your team in this course could be considered a secondary group. However, the table here lists the ideal characteristics, and most groups have qualities of both types of groups. As you work together on your teams, I suspect you will see more clearly exactly what I mean. Let's move on to talk a little bit about group dynamics. Groups typically benefit from two types of leadership. There are two leadership roles: instrumental versus expressive. Instrumental leadership emphasizes the completion of tasks, while expressive leadership emphasizes the collective well-being of everyone in the group. Instrumental leaders focus on performance, and they have secondary relationships with other members. Expressive leaders have more personal relationships with other group members. A combination of these leadership roles can lead to an effective and likable leader. Research is showing us that the best leadership depends on the nature of the task, the situation being dealt with, and the composition of the group. There are also three leadership styles which relate to the process of decision-making in groups. The first is authoritarian leadership, which focuses on instrumental concerns, takes personal charge of decision-making, and demands strict compliance from subordinates. Now, this style works well in a crisis when the leader needs to take charge very quickly. Democratic leadership is more expressive and it tries to include everyone in the decision-making process. Laissez-faire leadership allows the group to function more or less on its own. Group conformity is another fascinating area of group dynamics. Groups promote conformity. People want the feeling of belonging. Ash's research into group conformity showed that many of us are willing to compromise our own judgment to avoid being different, even from people we don't know. In Ash's research, people felt pressure from others in the group to give what they knew was the wrong answer. You can see a video of Ash's experiment in this unit. Milgram found a high percentage of people respond to authority figures and are willing to give potentially lethal shocks to someone. Milgram was actually surprised at how readily people obeyed authority figures. Almost 2/3 of the participants administered the highest level of shock. Now, there was deception in this research, as the shock generator wasn't real and the recipient of the so-called shocks was an actor. But Milgram's research into obedience suggests that people are likely to follow directions not only from legitimate authority figures, but also groups of ordinary individuals, even when it means inflicting harm on another person. Janis's research dealt with the process called groupthink, the tendency of group members to conform by adopting a narrow view of some issue. What else do we know about groups? A reference group is a social group that serves as a point of reference for people making evaluations or decisions. We will make upward or downward social comparisons. We actually get a sense of well-being by looking at how we compare relative to certain reference groups. For example, if we compare ourselves to a group that's not doing very well, we will feel better about ourselves. In-groups and out-groups. An in-group is a social group commanding a member's esteem and loyalty. An out-group is a social group toward which one feels competition or opposition. Those are the textbook definitions. Let me explain, though, that there's a tendency to judge members of an out-group negatively. Another way to look at this is the in-group is the group which you are a member of. The out-group contains people who are not in your in-group. I hope that made sense. Once I artificially created in-group and out-group status in a classroom. It was quite interesting. I divided the class into the group that wore sneakers that day, and the other group was the group that wore regular shoes. Then I had each group make a list of 10 reasons that the other group wore a different type of footwear. We read the lists out loud, and amazingly, the lists were predominantly negative, and they actually got worse as I read down the lists. As mentioned in the text, in-groups and out-groups foster loyalty, but they also tend to generate conflict. A dyad is George Simmel's term for a social group with 2 members. Social interaction in a dyad is typically intense, and dyads are typically less stable than larger groups. A triad is a social group with 3 members. Triads are more stable than dyads because one person can act as a mediator. A final thought about group size: the number of relationships grows more rapidly than the number of people. And you can see from this graphic that as we move beyond dyads and triads to 4, 5, 6, and 7 people, that the number of relationships is significantly larger than the number of people in the group. And you can imagine how this translates into the complexity of having group meetings, or even the challenges of being a therapist leading a group therapy session. Formal organizations are large secondary groups that are designed to achieve their goals efficiently. 3 types of formal organizations are utilitarian organizations. These are the ones people join in pursuit of material rewards, to make money, in other words. Normative organizations, or voluntary organizations, are the ones in which people pursue goals they consider morally worthwhile. And finally, there are coercive organizations which are characterized by involuntary membership. Formal organizations date back thousands of years, and bureaucracy became common during the Industrial Revolution. Bureaucracy is an organizational model rationally designed to perform tasks efficiently. And I'm sure you hear Max Weber's ideas in this definition. This is how an organization gets things done. Weber identified 6 key characteristics of bureaucracy. 1. Specialization. 2. Hierarchy of offices. Workers are arranged in a vertical ranking. 3. Rules and regulations. 4. Technical competence. This refers to the special training people have for their jobs, and also the performance standards that are set up. 5. Impersonality. Rules tend to be placed ahead of the person. And 6. Formal written communication. It's been said that paperwork is the heart of bureaucracy. And I'm sure you've heard that the job's not done until the paperwork's turned in. Bureaucracies have been described as wasteful and inefficient. Even though they're designed to operate efficiently, problems can arise. Some of these problems include bureaucratic alienation, which according to Weber is the reduction of the human being to a small cog in a ceaselessly moving mechanism. Ouch. People do need to have meaning and purpose in what they do. Another problem is bureaucratic inefficiency and ritualism, which is the preoccupation with rules and regulations to the point that it interferes with reaching an organization's goals. Bureaucratic inertia is the tendency of bureaucratic organizations to perpetuate themselves. And Robert Mitchell's made the link between bureaucracy and oligarchy, the rule of the many by the few. The iron law of oligarchy refers to the pyramid shape of bureaucracy, placing a few leaders in charge of organizational resources. Due to the problems of bureaucracy and its effect on workers, some organizations are moving to a flatter organizational model, which you see on the right. On the left, you see conventional bureaucracy, which has a clear chain of command where orders flow down from the top. Organizations that move toward the flatter shape have fewer levels of hierarchy and are more flexible and open in that they give workers more responsibility for making decisions. Responsibility is shared throughout the organization. Many workers do their jobs in teams. Now, the pressure to modify conventional organizations is coming from the nature of work itself, including a shift from making things to processing information. But the shift to organizational flexibility has brought the threat of downsizing as companies are eager to cut costs by eliminating routine jobs. The principles of McDonald's, or McDonaldization, have come to dominate many formal organizations in society. And this has both positive and negative consequences for society. Have you ever noticed that when you shop, the same few stores are located in that same mini mall, including restaurants and drugstores, convenience stores, or clothing stores? This is evidence of what the sociologist George Ritzer conceptualized as the McDonaldization of society. In Ritzer's intriguing book, he argues that the same organizational principles that have made McDonald's such a successful chain of restaurants have been adopted by many other formal organizations in order to be efficient and successful. Ritzer identified the operational principles of McDonald's which have made the chain so successful: predictability, efficiency, uniformity, and control through automation. Also, have you noticed that when you walk into any Best Buy or any other large retail chain store, you're immediately familiar with the terrain? The layout of that store that you walk into is just like the layout of stores across the country. The principle of predictability is at work here. Not only does the customer find the item where they expect to find the item, but the customer will find the brand names expected, or in the case of McDonald's, the same French fry, which will taste the same as a fry at the McDonald's anywhere else. In order for a customer to find the same item, or for the fry to taste the same at any store across the nation, it requires a high level of efficiency. The organization must be able to bring a massive quantity of items and distribute them quickly to the stores. While predictability speaks to meeting customer expectations, large organizations also rely on the principle of uniformity to meet customer expectations. Uniformity is manufacturing the items on a massive scale so that they weigh, look, feel, and even smell and taste exactly the same. McDonald's is actually the largest purchaser of French fries in the world. McDonald's dictates the general weight, feel, and taste of the potatoes that the growers produce. This is not only an example of uniformity, but also an example of control, Ritzer's last principle. Everything is now controlled, from the seeds planted in the ground, to the harvesting of produce, to shipping of products, to distribution warehouses, to the environment where the customer orders the item. Every single link in this chain is highly controlled in order to achieve predictability, uniformity, and efficiency. Large formal organizations have found that automation is the best way to achieve all of these objectives. Even the people that ring up your items don't have to think about what they're doing very much because everything is now automated. Although control, efficiency, predictability, and uniformity give us many benefits and conveniences, there is a downside. A person making a meal at McDonald's cannot in any way deviate from the prescribed manual. There's no room for human creativity, which makes people machine-like. Creativity and originality are not considered and are even discouraged. Before concluding this presentation, let's take a look at the future of formal organizations. And there are some opposing trends. Evolving toward flatter, more flexible models has led to intelligent organizations, which are more productive, and they have workers who enjoy creative freedom, thus decreasing alienation. However, the post-industrial economy has created more routine service jobs as well, and more automation. Technology and privacy are opposing forces today. It's hardly news any longer. We live in the so-called information age. Virtually all information is stored in computer databases. The quest for ever greater levels of efficiency has led to a scramble to obtain more and more information about individuals and consumers. Yet, while many people express concerns about the loss of their privacy, most of us are willing accomplices. Do you use a bank card at an ATM machine? Do you shop by mail order or visit commercial websites? Do you browse websites on the internet? If so, you're being tracked, and most of us realize it. Perhaps, when it comes right down to it, we value convenience over privacy. Here are a couple of examples of how by doing very simple everyday things you inadvertently leave electronic footprints. Let's say you have allergies and call an 800 number to check the pollen count in your area. Your number is recorded by caller ID and you're put on a list of allergy sufferers. The list is then sold to a drug company. Next thing you know, you're sent a coupon for that company's allergy medication. Or let's say you're eating out and you order a burger and fries. At the restaurant, your order is entered into a computer. You pay by credit card. The restaurant then checks your credit rating and sends you a discount offer for your next visit. Unfortunately, the restaurant then goes bankrupt and its list of burger and fries lovers goes on the information market. Technology has brought a lot of new conveniences, but it's also brought some new problems that society has yet to address.